Okay, now we're going to start the first Mishnah of the Perek, Mishnah Aleph. This Mishnah is going to give us the opportunity to learn new concepts about the mitzvah of returning items, but also the ability to develop our skills to divide the Mishnah even more. So you should open up to page 13, and here we have the skills, the signals that we use for dividing the Mishnah. The first one is the prefix vav. Vav means and. A prefix means something that we add before a word. Like, for example, in English, if we say do or redo, re is a prefix. It adds to the meaning of the word. The same thing in Hebrew. We have several prefixes. One of them is the vav, which means and. We stop before and because and starts a new phrase. Number two, the word o, which means or, because again, that's a new phrase. This is new to us. Number three, the name of a Tana. Right in the parenthesis, Tana is the rabbi from the time of the Mishnah. Sometimes the Mishnah mentions the names of the rabbis who speak in the Mishnah, sometimes not. For example, in the first two Mishnayot that we did this year, there were no names mentioned. In this Mishnah, we're going to discover that the name is mentioned. So we always stop before the name is mentioned. That's another speaker. And finally, the next skill that we're going to use in this Mishnah is a word that tells us the din or the halacha that we know from before. Now, let's focus on some of the basic words of this Mishnah before we actually divide it. Leachriz means to announce. Mefuzar, something that is scattered. Ma'ot is money. Krichot are bundles. Bundles are in the field where the farmer, let's say, cuts the wheat. And when he cuts a certain amount, he puts a string around it. He makes a bundle, and he leaves it. And then he cuts another bunch and makes another bundle. And at the end of the day, he picks up all the bundles. Number 5 is Reshuta Rabim. That's a public place, like, for example, the street. Number 6, Kikar is a loaf of bread. 7 is a common Hebrew word. Dag means fish. 8, Chaticha is a piece, like a piece of meat. Number 9 is basar. Basar is meat. 10, shinui is something we know from Pesach. Ma nishtana. Shinui means different, something unusual. Number 11, ketzad is how. And finally, 12 is a kli. We already know a kli is a utensil, a vessel. A kli could be a pen, a hammer, a phone. Anything that has a use is a kli. Now, let's go back to the Mishnah and let's begin to divide this Mishnah. So this Mishnah begins with a title. Some Mishnayot have a title, and the title of this Mishnah is Eilu Metziot shelo ve'eilu chayav lehachris. Some Metziot, some fines are his to keep, you may keep, ve'eilu chayav lehachris, and these you have to announce. Meaning, the Mishnah is telling us that there's going to be two categories of lost items. They're lost, but sometimes when you find a lost item is shelo, you're allowed to keep it. Ve'eilu chayav leachriz, but sometimes when you find a lost item, you have to announce it. Now the Mishnah tells us, Eilu Metziot shelo. In this Mishnah, we are going to discuss the category of items that you can keep. The next Mishnah we will learn, Mishnah Bet, will discuss the other type of lost items that you have to announce. So again, the title is composed of 3 parts. Eilu Metziot shelo. These fines are his to keep. Eilu chayav leachriz. These you have to announce. Eilu Metziot shelo. And this Metziot that we're going to be mentioning in this Mishnah, these lost items, you're allowed to keep. First example, Matzah perot mefuzarin. If you found money that was scattered, notice again that this is past tense, matzah, that makes it a case. Ma'ot mefuzarot, or if you find scattered money. Krichot berushuta rabim, or if you find bundles in a public place. Ve'igulei devela, and again this is a vav, so we stop before the vav. This is a new example. If you find cakes of figs, in those days figs were very common and they used to make cakes from figs. Kikarot shel nachtom, or if you find bread that is made by a baker. Magzuzot shel dagim, or if you find strings of fish. Often when fishermen will go fishing, they catch a bunch of fish and they put them all in a string. They hang them in one string. When you get to the wiser, you'll see a picture of that. Again, we have the Vav, V'chatichot shel basar. We find cuts of meat, pieces of meat. Again, a Vav, so we stop. V'gizei tzemer baot memedinatan. If you find pieces of wool that is still the way it was brought in from the country, which means it was imported wool, is still in its raw state, it hasn't been processed. The wool is still in its natural state, it's just a clump of wool. It is now the same way that it was brought from its medina, from its country. It hasn't been changed. So that kind of wool is common, there's nothing special about it, and therefore you can keep it. Vanitzei pishtan, if you find pieces of flax is a plant from which you make linen. Uleshonot shel argaman, if you find pieces of purple wool, that was a very common color that was used in the time of the Mishnah. So since it's common, if you find it, you can keep it. Are eilu shelo, all of these that are mentioned before, you can keep. And we stop here because Divrei Rav Meir, this is the opinion of Rav Meir. Rav Meir is the author, he's the speaker who told us all this information before. We stop here because we have another name. Rabbi Huda is going to speak now. It's a different speaker, so we stop. Rabbi Huda Omer, Rabbi Huda says, and this is what he says, Kol sheyesh bo shinui, anything that has something unusual, chayav leachris, you have to announce it. If you find an item that has something unusual, something different about it, then you have to announce it. We stop here because chayav is the din word, and leachris is the end of the din, because Ketzad is how, that's a question. Ketzad, how is this? Meaning, give me an example of something that is unusual. So here's the first example. Matzah igul ubetocho cheres. Notice that here we didn't stop with the Vav, even though usually we do, but that's not always true, so it's a little tricky. Matzah igul, if you find a cake, and inside of it you find a piece of cheres, of clay, like a piece of pottery. So that's not usual, that's not normal, so that you have to announce. Another example, kikar, if you find a loaf of bread, ubetocho ma'ot, and you find a coin inside. You find a piece of bread and somehow there was a coin stuck in there. That's very unusual, so that you have to announce. And we stop here because now we have a new speaker. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, this is our speaker. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Kol kli amfuria, anything that is brand new, meaning something that is you just bought it in the store, you didn't get a good look at it. Eino chayav leachris. Eino is the din word. Eino chayav. He's not obligated to announce it, and therefore we stop over there.